Hello, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Apologies for the delay. Don't you just love technology? Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mark from Nine, Data Privacy in the Age of AI. Over to you, Mark.
Perfect. Just checking that you can all hear me loud and clear. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, apologies about that. There are some gremlins in the somewhere anyway. So welcome to the session and data privacy in the age of AI and navigating compliance and vendor vetting for schools. So really this session is to focus on a bit really about how regulation is changing in the EU and also in the UK, and how that's going to have an influencing factor on using tech in schools, and specifically then how you go on to the assessment of those particular vendors. And I'm going to touch upon some solutions that we have from Nine that you can get access to. And I'm also going to introduce our new governance library as well, which is if you've got a freemium account already to the Nine platform, will be added to your account in the next few weeks. So I'm going to take you through the current or a new piece of regulation called the EU AI Act that has a ripple effect. Obviously, we're no longer within the EU, so we're not directly affected by the EU AI regulation, but there are changes afoot in the UK that will affect how we assess vendors, and specifically the considerations around AI. I'll talk about some of the indirect factors of the law that will have an impact. I thought it was worthwhile also just touching upon Ofsted's approach to AI, looking at what the Department for Education is saying, sort of global consensus in the use of AI, direction of travel. There's a theme called human in the loop, which is basically, are teachers responsible for policing the use of AI in the classroom? And then we'll touch upon the UNESCO AI competency framework for teachers. So quite a few things to go through. In doing so, when you get these slide decks, so Rick, hopefully you can ping this out to all of the, yeah, perfect. I've included all the references, so you have access to all of the documents that I have referred to, either from the DFE, the Ofsted, all the way down to the stuff here from UNESCO and KICSI and whatnot. So if you haven't seen those resources before, then those are useful, and certainly wants to socialize within the leadership team, within the school, within your school, particularly this one here, this UNESCO AI competency framework. So anyone who is leading on the introduction of AI technologies within your school or overseeing those, they will definitely want to have a read of that article, because it's incredibly useful in terms of how things are likely going to change, not only in the UK but also globally. So let's take a step back and look at the EU AI Act. So it's very similar in structure to the GDPR, if you're familiar with that. And essentially, it's a regulation there to regulate public and private AI providers and deployers. And so within the GDPR, you have a thing called like the controller and a processor. This is sort of like a similar concept, but you've got a provider and a deployer. And a school is essentially deemed a deployer of AI technologies under the EU AI Act. And a provider is someone like Arbor, for example. If Arbor integrate AI into their MIS, then they would become a provider, and a school is a deployer. ChatGPT, that they are a provider of AI. So whether you're providing the actual core technology itself, as in the LLM or whatever model it is, or whether you are integrating it within your actual platform and you're providing that as a product to people, you are essentially a deployer. And in the law, those of you who are using it in school are deemed as a deployer. Why it's important for us, even though we're outside of the EU, is that it will have a significant impact comparable to the GDPR. So what happened with the GDPR was published in 2016. Everyone had a 2-year grace period up until 2018 to be compliant. And there is a core component of extraterritorial scope within the GDPR, which basically had an influence of how data is being processed in other countries or companies in other countries and how they're processing the personal data of EU nationals. So consequently, you had this ripple effect where countries outside of the EU essentially took the GDPR, copied, paste, added a little flavor to it, changed a couple of words, but in essence, in most countries you go to around the world with a new data protection law beyond after 2018, it's essentially a copy and the paste of the GDPR with slightly local variations. So the only sort of main area where that's different is in the US, where there's no federal data protection law. It's all driven on a state-by-state basis, but even they're sort of navigating towards a sort of GDPR based structure. So essentially, there's going to be a global influence. There's going to be a global influence. It's like the primary piece of regulation when it comes to AI that has been that has come out, and specifically the most detailed. It's a very rules based. You can do this, you can't do that. And so when you look at the ripple effect, most companies who are trading within the EU or want to trade with organizations in the EU, including all the edtech vendors, are likely going to have to change their terms and conditions, their privacy notices, all the information that they provide to replicate the obligations of the EU AI Act if they are using AI within their platform, because if they don't, then it's going to cause a barrier to be able to either continue serving schools in the EU, or certainly it'd be a barrier in terms of the friction to signing a contract with those organizations. So the terms and conditions that you're likely to currently be using with all the edtech providers that you have, in the next 12 to 18 months, you'll probably get an inflow of new terms and conditions, new privacy notices, new information security policies, and two specific documents that are related to how the AI works. So part of the EU AI Act is that providers of AI, whether it be whether they are a core ChatGPT or whether they embed it within their platform, have to provide two documents. One document is a functional document that like a layman can read and understand how the AI works. And a second document is a technical document that goes into the detail about how the AI has been trained, what data sets it's used, how the provider has sought to mitigate any risks pertaining to bias or discrimination or anything like sort of in those sorts of areas. So essentially a deployer of AI, as in a school, can read the functional document, can read the technical document, put it together with the terms and conditions and make a decision as to whether they are going to use that platform in their school, having been informed at a functional level and at a technical level before they start using the AI. Or if you're already using the AI, then you would go through the process of evaluating whether you can continue to use it given the risks that are potentially posed. As I mentioned, it's a very rules-based approach. So it is like you have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if you don't do that, you can get fined, which is 7% of turnover or 35 million euros, whatever is higher, slightly higher than the GDPR. But again, most of you here are schools in England. Therefore, the fines aren't relevant, but it's just interesting to know that this is the way that the EU is going. And the way that they have structured their approach to AI is to identify 4 levels of risk. So you have this unacceptable risk that's basically banned from February. So February 2025, you cannot use as a school any AI that is deemed within the unacceptable risk boundary, all the way through to AI that's deemed like minimal risk. So ChatGPT is essentially a minimal risk platform. But in order to work out whether you've got any of those classifications of risk, you need to evaluate all of the AI in your school, ask all of your teachers to tell you which AI they've signed up to independently if they have, and to evaluate where the AI would sit in each of those buckets. Specifically, if you're a school in the EU, again, if you're in England or in the UK, it's not so relevant, but it's just interesting to know that that there are those classifications. And interestingly, they have identified a thing called high risk. So you have the unacceptable risk, that's banned, it's illegal, and then you have the high risk. And one of the identifiers of a high risk AI is that one that influences learning outcomes or adjusts the learning process. And you'll have in your schools lots of platforms, certainly within COVID, who were saying, buy our platform, it's going to make your kids smarter. We profile the behavior of the child and what they're doing, and then we'll put in relevant questions to influence and navigate their learning journey through the platform. And we're using AI to do that because our platform is cutting edge. So any platforms that you have within your school that are sort of labeled like that or marketed like that, in the EU setting, they are deemed as high risk, and it's very rules based, and it's very rules driven. And so schools deploying AI systems in any sense of the word have certain obligations. Not only do you need to understand how it works in terms of a functional and technical level, and you'll need to do this in England and the UK as well. So whilst in the EU, it's like rules, you must do these things. We're being very specific. These are the deadlines that you must achieve. All the things I am saying, although it's not as prescriptive, are requirements for you in school in the UK. You'll have to do all of these things. You have to evaluate the functional level, the technical assessment. You have to be aware of the different requirements that Ofsted and the DFE say, and certainly what the ICO in the UK require you to be doing when it comes to deploying AI. You need to ensure that all of your GDPR-related documentation has been up to date, so your privacy notices, any policies, the list of all the assessments that you've done, any DPIAs that may be relevant to those, the assessments of the particular vendors themselves. And it's likely that you will need to do this through appointing someone within your school with a responsibility for this. So in the GDPR, there is a requirement in most circumstances to have a designated data protection officer. In the EU AI Act, in their rules-based approach, it's like you must have an AI officer. And in the approach that the UK is taking, which is more principles-based, it basically says you need to have someone who's responsible for AI. It's not being as specific as the EU in terms of you need an AI officer, but it's basically pointing in that direction that you need someone who's responsible for making all of these types of decisions. And in the EU, there are specific milestones: February 25, August 25, and August 2026, where you as a school need to be doing certain things. And it's these milestones that are going to drive the changes in contracts, the changes in privacy notice, the functional, the technical documentation that you're likely to start seeing from your edtech vendors over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, given that if most of them also operate and sell internationally, they will have to do so because legally, if they don't do so and they are not discharging their obligations in a legal sense, then they can't trade with those specific obligations. And in those contracts, much like what happened with the GDPR, the terms and conditions created by those edtech vendors will put specific legal obligations on you as a customer. So they'll say, as a customer, you are compliant with these things when it comes to AI. These are the things that you do, and we are transferring our liability through you in this contract. And you have all of our documentation to read, so you know that you're making the right decision and that you understand the liabilities that you're taking. So it's those deadlines that are going to really impact schools in the UK. So in the UK, we have a more principles-based approach. So there are 5 principles that I'll touch upon in a moment. And then the sort of overall guidance from the government is then at a sector-based level. There'll be references to what you have to do. So from a school's context, there'll be references in Keeping Children Safe Education. There'll be responsibilities in the Academy Trust Handbook. There'll be references in the DFE Digital Standards. The ICO and any other regulatory documents that come out from the various people that have responsibilities in the realm of schools. So Ofsted, for example, have certain requirements when it comes to AI, and there are certain policy papers that are kicking around that I've included links to in the slide deck that Rick will distribute. So when you get a chance, you can take a look at that. Within Ofsted, they refer in their policy paper to the 5 principles that the UK government has set. And so they've interpreted those principles, through the lens of schools, and particularly through the lens of inspection in schools. So from their expectation, schools who are using AI are expected to follow these principles. So with safety, security, and robustness, you are expected to assure yourself, as in assure your school, that AI solutions are secure and safe for users and protect users' data, and ensure that you as a school can identify and rectify bias or error. So that's part of this, can become part of the inspection framework. So Ofsted could say, show us how you have evaluated the AI from a safety, security, and robustness perspective. How are you confident that the AI that you're using is secure and safe, and that it protects users' data? And how are you managing to reduce the risk of bias or error of those platforms? Appropriate transparency and explainability. So within the EU AI Act, it's very clear you have to have a functional document and a technical document, and as a provider of AI, you have to provide that to deployers at schools. As a school, you need to read those documents and be confident that you understand how they go together, and that, dovetailing to the GDPR, you need to make your staff, students, parents aware of the AI that you are using, and also provide them with a degree of confidence that you have evaluated the functional and the technical levels. This statement here doesn't go into all of that detail, but the direction is the meaning is basically the same thing, is that you need to be transparent about the use of AI, and make sure that users of your, who are using AI within your school, understand the suggestions that it makes. And you need to have confidence that you can explain to people, if they're asked, what is this AI doing with personal data? If a parent asks, okay, across all of the EdTech apps that you have in your school, how often is AI actually used or component of that product? You would need to have the answer to meet the standards. Fairness, only use AI solutions that are ethically appropriate. In particular, we expect schools to consider bias relating to small groups and protect characteristics before using AI, monitor bias closely, and correct problems where appropriate. So where you are using AI, you really need to understand the training of the data sets that it's been used to be trained upon, so that if there are groups who are if there are groups with protected characteristics, or with characteristics where the AI platform may not be trained upon, it's not inadvertently discriminating against those individuals, and you need to have oversight on that. So how do you have that oversight? How do you monitor the output that's being provided or created through the AI technology that you're using in your school? Is it the IT team, or is it the teachers in the classroom? Because someone needs to have responsibility for it, and as a school, you need to have a policy that defines who has responsibilities for these things. Accountability and governance. I don't think I've already said this point. So there needs to be clear roles and responsibilities. So in all of your schools, do any of you have? You may have an AI policy, but is it clear in terms of the delineation of responsibility between different individuals? What's IT's responsibilities? Who is responsible from the academic side? How does safeguarding and the designated safeguarding lead or the team, how do they intersect in terms of monitoring the use of AI and the risks that AI can generate from a safeguarding and child protection perspective? And contestability and redress. So making sure that staff are empowered to correct an overall AI suggestions, decisions to be made by the user of AI and not the technology. So, depending on how you're using it, is there an actual need for an intervention if necessary? So are the outputs of any AI that you're using quite significant? And if they are quite significant, what measures do you have in place as a school to intervene to limit those behaviours from continuing, or the outputs to continue? So when you look at the principles and you just think about them through the lens of the EU AI Act, they are actually incredibly similar. It's just that they aren't as defined. They're more high level a bit more open for interpretation. But in actual fact, there are sort of clear things that you as schools need to be doing, and Ofsted, are quite clear in terms of their expectations when it comes to inspection. This is from a policy paper from last October, so almost a year ago, from the Department of Education, and it's a policy paper. It's the words should, not will or must, but schools and colleges should protect personal and special category data in accordance with data protection legislation. So before you start using AI, you need to first of all ensure that it's part of your ROPA, that you have assessed the vendor. You understand the transfer of personal data from you as a school to that particular provider, and you understand the categories of personal data that are handed over. Is it first name, last name, email address, or are there other bits of data that are being transferred? Not allow or cause intellectual property, including pupils' work, to be used to train Gen AI models without appropriate consent or exemption to copyright. So which AI are you using, and are kids putting their work into it, and does that have some beneficial use to the provider of the AI? Review and strengthen cybersecurity by referring to cyber standards. Gen AI could increase the sophistication and credibility of attacks. In the next 24 months, probably shorter than that, we are expected to see a significant increase in the number of cyber attacks, full stop, whether they're in education or anywhere else, because the hackers can, much like we can use AI to review reports or to create slide deck or do something different. Hackers can use AI to create code to identify vulnerabilities of schools based upon the IP address, and then it can escalate its privileges automatically rather than needing a human to oversee or write the code. So you have that type of attack, which is you're going to suddenly see the friction removed from a typical cyber attack on a school, all the way through to AI when it's embedded within specific platforms, that is going to have vulnerabilities to it, and you can write things into a model, and you can crack that model and start getting it to do things that it wasn't programmed to do initially through some form of cyber attack. So you are likely going to see those sorts of attacks starting to develop. And at the moment, like, our own perception of the edtech market is they are incredibly poor when it comes to cybersecurity protections. Even at this moment in time, if you look at the majority of the largest edtech vendors that most of you will buy into, with the exception of Microsoft, most of them don't do more than 1 or 2 cyber pen tests a year on their own code, and they are deploying new code every single week. At 9, for our own platform, I think I've said this before, if you've been on these before, we do an assessment of our code, and then we do a full pen test at every deployment of our code. So we'll do maybe 30 to 40 deployments a year. So we're doing 30 to 40 pen tests of our platform a year. Most providers only do, or edtech vendors only do that once or twice. And that gives cause for concern, given that many of those providers are then rushing to embed AI into their software, not necessarily knowing what they're putting into their software. And that in itself opens up a huge load of risks on their existing code base. Ensure that children and young people are not accessing or creating harmful or inappropriate content online. So this is very much similar to KICSI, and refer to the filter and monitoring standard to make sure that they have appropriate systems in place. So this is back in October, and this one was more recently. I think this was in August, but you'll have the link to these things, points of reference within the school. And then generally there's a global consensus. As a business, we have schools in the UK, we have schools in most countries around the world, and so we have to we have a research team who's focused on looking at what are the changes when it comes to regulation, or comes to laws, or comes to policy, not only in privacy and cyber, but also in AI, so we can guide our schools in those different territories about what they really should be thinking about, what they should be doing. And when you sort of look at it holistically and you take a step back and sort of lay out all the different laws and the different types of guidance, then there is global consensus that obviously the pace of development of AI is far, is going faster than the governance, the laws, the regulations that are being put into place. And in many cases, people are writing stuff and then it's out of date because the trajectory of development is so fast. So the UK taking like a principles-based approach. That's more like, okay, you can use AI, but only following these layers, and in those layers there are these things that you need to get done. Allows the UK to be more flexible in terms of the application of AI across all different industry sectors, and without being necessarily too bogged down in rules, much like similar to the EU. But in most cases within the UK, we still need to do all the things that are happening in EU schools, but we just haven't got the fines. And as I said, the guidance coming from the Ofsted and whatnot are very clear in terms of what you should be doing. In terms of impact on equity, there is a global emphasis in guidance that we're seeing and in law for AI systems that are fair, transparent, and inclusive. I mean, there are discussions about how those principles will be implemented in practice, but there's a lot of discussion on that. This whole principle of human in the loop. Guys, if you've got any questions, I don't know whether there's any questions coming in, Rick, so do interrupt me because I'm sort of rabbiting on. If there's anything else that people want to ask, then sort of just chuck it my way.
There has been one. Is there any way that collates what providers do with regards to pen testing, or do we have to do all the legwork ourselves?
The 9 vendor management solution does that. I'll show you that. So we have a new platform that we're evaluating all the main edtech vendors, and you're talking like all the hundreds of them, and we look at their cybersecurity, their privacy, their AI, and their safeguarding risks, and our consultants and evaluate their documentation to give you as a school an indication as to whether there are privacy risks using that vendor, cybersecurity risks using that vendor, and AI risks and safeguarding risks. So yeah, that is available through a platform that I'll show you a little later on. So human in the loop. Thanks, Rick. If there's anything else that comes in, then just ping me. Just stop me. So the human in the loop is a safeguard. So the human in the loop, this concept is around safeguarding against the risks of AI, and the emphasis is on maintaining some human oversight. And when we look at we'll touch upon the UNESCO report in a second, the competency framework, and essentially the general narrative wherever you go in the world now, when it comes to overseeing AI in education, specifically schools, is that this should be the teacher's responsibility. So the teacher is making decisions around, am I going to give a PowerPoint? Am I going to do some activity or worksheet? Or am I going to use AI? Certainly someone from the academic side is making those decisions. And so consequently, a teacher would typically evaluate the risks of the other activities that they're doing in their class. And now if they decide to use AI, then it's actually they're responsible, and they're accountable for ensuring that they understand what is going on with that particular platform or with the particular AI in that platform, so that they can intervene. And to do so, obviously, they need to have more understanding of the technology architecture about how the model is built, but also the functionality of that platform. I don't necessarily see that narrative going away. I think it's increasing in terms of volume, but as it does, you have this friction on the other side going, well, that's just crazy. Teachers just won't be doing that. We struggle with, in many instances, with change. Teachers are already overworked. Adding something else to their plate is just not going to be practical. So there's going to have to be, with this developing narrative, and with schools really wanting to use AI in many cases, there's going to be this friction. There's going to be conversations that need to be had about what is the role in teachers in overseeing this, because it's not necessarily a responsibility that a single person can be responsible for. So you can't necessarily have one single person that's responsible for looking at AI in every classroom and every edtech platform and then being able to intervene, because they're just not around in class when kids are using these platforms, or at home when using those platforms. So it's going to be an interesting area of evolution over the next 24 months, I think, when it comes to using AI, and how do you manage the particular risks of it. It's certainly not an IT job, right, to be intervening and looking at what it's doing from a pedagogy perspective, because it is around pedagogy rather than technical IT stuff. And you have this shared responsibility here between developers and schools. Vendors have a responsibility to be clear in terms of how they're using how they're using AI. So where do they get the model from initially? What's been trained on? What are the data sets? How it will grow? How it will evolve? And be able to describe that technically and also at a functional level. And schools have the responsibility to read all that stuff and go, okay, I understand what's been trained on. I understand what potential risks could be. Okay, there is elements of potentially bias and discrimination. We need to make sure our teachers know about that sort of stuff, because they're using it in classroom, and now they are the human in the loop. So they need to be aware of potential risks so they can intervene or know what to look out for in terms of what to intervene for, and constantly protect children from using those particular platforms. So at a global level, that's sort of like the consensus. That's the narrative that's going in most other in most countries, including the UK. And we're doing a lot more research on in the next 2 weeks. If you subscribe to our newsletter, like each week we've got something coming out about one bit's about human in the loop, the other bit's around how do we expect terms and conditions to be changing for vendors. Legally, what are those implications going to look like? So if you're not already signed up to the newsletter on the website, just go and fill out any form, you'll be added to it. We want to do like a whole process of like upskilling schools on those sorts of things. So you've got a whole range of resources coming out, and on the website there'll be like a whole AI section that's open to use, that covers off all these sorts of things that I'm talking about. We don't talk about the sort of the best edtech apps. We're more about the governance and the compliance components of it. So this is very interesting. It sort of touches on this. I won't go through the Ofsted bit, but what UNESCO have said, the re-examination of teachers' roles and competencies, and that is where there's going to be a lot of discussion. I think at a policy level and at a in a school level about what that actually means. Because you can't get away from not having those conversations, because the legal framework in the UK and England requires you to be doing these things. KICSI requires these things. Ofsted now require these things. The Academy Trust Handbook will likely refer to these things. And what UNESCO have come up with is like, okay, right, well, if it's moving forward and teachers are the human in the loop, and teachers really are the people who are making key decisions around pedagogy, around how kids are interacting with the AI platforms, no matter what it may be, then they need to be trained. They need to be aware of certain things, and there needs to be a depth of what that training looks like at a curriculum level. So they've come up with this this competency framework that has 5 aspects on the left hand side, and then you have like a rubric of basic, medium, advanced, and they call it acquire, deepening, create. And if you go into the document, it's about 60 pages long. It goes into far more detail about each of those individual areas. But I can certainly see circumstances where schools, when it comes to the next academic year, so they're training for schools for your teachers next September, much like everyone has to go, okay, here's new safeguarding training, I've done it all, or health and safety, here's the AI training. In actual fact, we are launching an LMS, a learning management system, that will be coming out in January with a specific training course on this for teachers. So there'll be differentiated learning paths, so teachers, heads of department, IT, privacy, safeguarding, those sorts of people that you can enroll. We'll probably incorporate some of this competency framework, but we'll build our own framework that you can subscribe to as a school if you want to. If you are looking out for good professional development and training for your teachers. So really, like, I would really encourage, when you get the slide deck, to get hold of this document and have someone on the academic side read it and have a discussion. Start having those discussions in school about, okay, how are we going to deal with these obligations of Ofsted? How are we going to do these developing concepts of human in the loop and these other things I've spoken about? How are we going to address those? Because it's soon, it's going to come around quite quickly in terms of the expectations on schools to be able to manage these and deal with it. Some of you who have already got freemium access to our schools risk framework, which is like, a risk register in our platform for education. We've just created a new risk category on artificial intelligence, which is, okay, there are risks in here. We've got 6 template risks as a school you would need to manage when it comes to artificial intelligence. So if you subscribe to the school's risk framework, then there is a new risk topic that is available to you. If you haven't already subscribed to our platform on any of the freemium models, this is one of the freemium frameworks that you can get access to. If you want to look at all the risks, we've got 150 risks across a whole range of different areas, not just technology. And actually, the IT one has been updated to include, that's a 6 there, is about 25 now, because we've included all of the key cyber risks that you should be managing based upon where we see current cyber risks. We do pen testing for schools every single week, so we have a very clear understanding of what are the key vulnerabilities or the key issues that schools are facing. So we sort of stuck that in our document. The thing, I spoke about AI and cybersecurity, the interface, the poor edtech coding, that sort of stuff. AI expands the attack surface. The US Department for Education are very strong on this. You have a load of stuff coming out from the NCSC in terms of messaging on this. You have DFE digital standards. We've got the DFE digital standards toolkit that we have an ANME offer that you all have access to, that so you can manage your and evidence how you are compliant with the DFE digital standards through the 9 platform. And actual fact, we also have like a guidance and a framework for you achieving cyber essentials. So if you're thinking of even doing cyber essentials and going, okay, where do I start? We have like the step-by-step instructions of step 1, do this, in all the 6 areas within our platform also. So it's a great resource. So in terms of the requirements for schools and the thing that you need to think about doing, the workload, okay, you'll have someone in your school is going to have to read and evaluate all those AI documents that start coming out, functional and technical. You'll be interfacing all that stuff with your current obligations when it comes to the GDPR. Many trusts were contacted by the ICO earlier this year saying, give us a list of all the edtech vendors you use, give us all the assessment documentation that you've undertaken, give us all the DPIAs that you've done, and that's an incredibly painful process if you've not done it before. But with AI is going to just elevate that pain, and there's going to be a timeline. All this takes time, and there's a load of responsibilities for it. A couple of things I want to show you. I won't be able to show you the actual platform live, but if you want to get in touch with through the website, any of the team can show you this sort of stuff. So we've got a new thing called application library. An application library is like your single repository where your teachers go to for all the edtech apps that you have in your school. And in there, you come in there and it shows you whether the edtech platform uses AI, whether there's any safeguarding concerns, the age range that tech is applicable for. You open up, you go into here, preview, and it shows you like how-to guides. So how to use this edtech when it comes to teaching and learning, different use cases. There is guidance there from a safeguarding perspective. So your DSL can go, Well, there are risks that as a teacher you need to be managing with this EdTech based on this. AI guidance in terms of this is a low risk AI or high risk AI. These are the restrictions around what you can do. And then teachers can also review it. So they can review the EdTech app and they can leave use cases for how they are using that particular EdTech in their in their classroom. In building this library, we are building out a lot of these sorts of templates of EdTech providers. But then you can then tailor those to your specific school. Going through the process, having done this with a number of trial schools, you're going to just reduce the number of duplication that you have with EdTech apps. And also staff can initiate the request process for new EdTech through this platform as well. So they request the EdTech, goes to your support at whateverschool.com, and then it kicks off a whole compliance process. So you can then integrate what you have in your school and how you've assessed it, and all the things the teachers need to know to be human in the loop, to everything they need on the GDPR side. So if you're interested in that, that actually got announced and launched today. Get in touch and one of the guys can give you an overview of that. And vendor library is like so you've got application library, teacher, admin side of all the tech that you have in your school. And then vendor library is actually the assessments. So that question that came up, Rick, about, do we have to assess the contracts? Do we have to assess the AI? We do all that. Our consultants do that following a standard template. So vendors will either do it and submit it to us, and then we evaluate it. And then from this screen here, for example, you can see whether there is AI, whether there's special category data. You can see whether there's any safeguarding concerns and that need to be managed. And that's all through the assessment of the contracts that are being provided to us by those vendors. And you'll see here we have certified vendors. So a certified vendor is then we have gone to a further level of analysis of that vendor, and they are demonstrating a professional approach to privacy. So we have two certifications, one for privacy and the other for cybersecurity. The ones that do the cybersecurity certification is where we have done the pen testing of the platform ourselves. So we have followed the OWASP top 10 in terms of assessing their platform, and then we will do that on a regular basis. So the vendor libraries, if you are concerned currently around, how do we assess all of the current platforms that we use? How do we do the DPIAs? We already have that all templated, and we have a recurring review process that our consultants do the work, rather than you have to. Some of you may already have a platform called GDPR in schools. Theirs is a very light touch version of what we do. And if you have a renewal for GDPR in schools, our core privacy platform, which is primarily what they do, which is slightly different to the vendor platform, will give you, we are selling our privacy platform at 50% off of the renewal costs that you'll get from GDPR in schools. So if you want to save some money in your school, and you use that or any other sort of competitor, it's a standing offer. We're a UK-based business, but we've sort of done NAF4 in the UK for the past few years, and we're very successful internationally. We want to just naturally grow with our schools in the UK, and hopefully you can see we certainly have the knowledge and the expertise about what we should be doing working with UK schools. Now we have a pricing framework across all of our software and services that can really support you, whether it be for pen testing, whether it be for AI assessments, or whether it be for anything to do with technology risk and compliance. The last thing I'm going to leave you through here is that we have this thing called the 9 Tech Academy launching. It's a certified professional development program, starts in November, and we take you through what's called the implementation of a zero trust architecture in your school. So there are either 6 or 9 workshops, one a month. We have about 40 people on each pathway, and we take you through, for example, email security or network security. There are then checklists of all the work you need to get done in terms of like implementing port level authentication or ACLs on network security or on email security, all the way through to implementing a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. So we have the templates for what that plan looks like. We tell you how to complete it. You have your homework to go and do that. And you're in this course on an ongoing basis with colleagues from other schools, not only in the UK, but globally. So the Tech Academy information is available here on the website. Also, hopefully one of my colleagues may put something into chat if they're on, but if not, it doesn't matter. You come to the website or get in contact with us, and yeah, we'll show you all that stuff. Rick, I think that's everything from my side.
Awesome.
I don't know whether you've got any questions, but if anyone has anything, then please just put your thoughts into chat or questions.
I've certainly not. That seems like a really well-rounded and well thought out service and platform. Thank you. There's no questions yet, but there is a 20-25 second delay, so we'll just give them a bit longer to get things typed in. But thank you. Thank you for joining us, and apologies again to everyone for the delay at the beginning. Yeah, I'm not saying any more about the technology involved in that. I am considering other options, though.
Yeah, Zoom's good. I've done 4 webinars this week, and Teams always seems to be the hardest one to use. I'm not saying it's nothing to do, but it's always the hardest one.
I don't think many people are doing these town halls either.
No, they're not. Very few. I've only ever done one other webinar, I think, with a town hall. But yeah,
was that ours last time?
Yeah.
So no more questions as yet.
Okay, fine.
Carol has posted the link in there to your website a couple of times.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Someone did ask about the links right at the beginning of the chat. I think you were referring to some of your services on the website.
Yeah. So obviously I've spoken a lot of stuff about what we do. You may not find all that. We've just got to launch a new website. Not everything's on there yet. So anything that's that you're interested in, just do a contact us on the website, and one of the guys can then take you through and show you all the stuff. So they can give you access to the platform if it's a platform. If you want to do pen testing, either if you're a single school or you're all an entire trust, our pricing, we have trust-based pricing that is as competitive or probably more competitive than secure schools. We've been doing our cybersecurity practice has been around since 2016, and most other people are coming out of the woodwork in the past few years. So I would say we have a far more in-depth approach to how we approach these things, and we have the business has been going for 16 years, purely in education. So we are the people that you should be coming to, even if you don't choose us, but hopefully you will see that we have a lot of good stuff. And Rick, all these things that we are doing in terms of ebooks and all that other sort of stuff, we'll make sure that you have copies, so so people can get access to that sort of stuff as well.
Magic. Thank you. This is being recorded. I'll get it trimmed off and get rid of that delay at the beginning, and share it on the portal on the website tomorrow, and we'll get the presentation uploaded. And yeah, I think That's about it then.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thanks for staying on and listening to me. I hope that has been useful for you, Rick, and it's been a pleasure again. And I suppose we'll call it a day.
Magic. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.